Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're so glad that you're able to join us today for this webinar that's dedicated to advocacy. So just a couple of housekeeping issues before we start. This is a webinar format, so we can't see you, you can see us, so so we dressed pretty for you today and handsomely. And as far as housekeeping, there's a Q&A. I'm on an Android, so mine is up on the upper right-hand corner. It might be different on your format. So what we're asking is that if you have a question that you want to submit during the time of the presentation discussion, feel free to do that. I mean, people do use the chat as well, but it's easy for us to field it through Q&A. And, we will facilitate and negotiate those questions accordingly. So thank you for that. And the other thing that we are interested in is that, this is such an important topic, advocacy, and how we advocate for those that we care for, plan for, provide for, etc. And we're interested in knowing what brought you to our webinar today. Was it education? Was it curiosity? Was it a situation that you're going through? So, please feel free to share that information to us, because we are interested to know from your perspective what was important for you. So with that being said, my name is Vicki Elner. I am the outreach and government affairs consultant for Ronald Fatula and Associates. It's a privilege to serve this firm, and we've been doing webinars, with different topics over the past few months, and this is something that we feel is really timely, really pertinent, and we have a great panel and a great moderator. So the title of it is Confusing, Complicated, and Frustrating. Oh my! All right. Well, you know what? Advocacy is critical for medical, legal, and insurance issues. And very briefly, think about when I named this, or when we named this title, we thought about, oh my God, remember Dorothy when she landed in Oz, and there she was, lost, didn't know how to get to where she had to be, and she collected people along the way, and they wanted to help her in the best way possible, and one needed the courage, one needed the brain, and one needed the heart. Well, we feel that advocates have those three components. So for today, with your panel, which includes Adria Gross, who is an insurance advocate, and her advocacy, how she led to it, really was some personal experiences. We also have a physician, Georgianne Barbarella, who has a company called Patient Advocacy MD. So she had years of a primary care physician practice and realized that her talents could be utilized in the world of advocacy. So she segued into that. And for the legal aspect of it, we have, really the incomparable Ron Fatula from Ron Fatula and Associates here, who's hosting this event today to talk about the legal aspect of advocating. So we're looking forward to a very robust, very inspiring, very pertinent, and a very educational program for you today. With that being said, we had to find somebody out there who could moderate this amazing panel, all right? And I had to think and think and think. I took about, 20 seconds, all right? And that brought us to Carol Waldman. Carol Waldman is head and shoulders above so many people out there in terms of the advocacy world. Besides being a colleague of mine, she's also a good friend, and I always say I want to be her when I grow up. And Carol has been a gerontologist for about 30 years. And while she recently retired from her position as executive director of one of the largest and most active senior centers in the state, which was the Glen Cove Senior Center, her accomplishments include overseeing the Long Island Coalition for Aging, the Nassau County Senior Service Providers Coalition, and currently, and this is really amazing, she is a Nassau County liaison for the very exciting AARP Work Health Organization Age Friendly Initiative. That's a big buzz thing out there with age-friendly communities. Most importantly, she has spent her years advocating on behalf of thousands of seniors that she has served. She understands the nature of advocacy, the qualities it takes to be an effective advocate, the frustrations and challenges associated with advocacy, and fortunately, the joy and the rewards that strong advocacy can bring. So I'm going to turn the program over to my friend and my heroine, my Shiro, Carol Waldman. Thank you, Carol.
Vicki, thank you so much, and welcome everyone. It's so good that you're with us today. The premise of this webinar is actually the importance of advocacy. This has its roots in the reality that life is not perfect. People aren't perfect, organizations, systems aren't perfect, and yet, if we try really hard to make a better world, if we break down one wall, or if we're able to even crack open a part of a window to let some air and light in, there is the hope that it's possible to achieve it. And that sense of hope is where it begins, advocacy, but it's a long journey and a lot of hard work from there. Given the times that we're living through and the challenges of navigating our complex healthcare system and our aging process, this is an especially meaningful conversation to be having. Advocating for someone that you love or a client or a cause is one of the most significant ways that you can make a difference. And we're fortunate enough to have 3 people with us today who really are what I call game changers. People in need have reached out to each of them for guidance and support with their high-profile professional backgrounds, their years of experience in their respective fields, and in their openness to work with others. They've brought resolve to problems, peace of mind to clients and their families, and even new legislation that brings us all into a more compassionate and just world. But the best way to define and explore advocacy is really to dig right in and see it work its magic. We're going to be hearing 3 different cases this afternoon, and after each case, we will try and entertain a brief discussion and any questions you may have. And then after the 3 speakers share their work, hopefully we'll have a few more moments left for more questions, comments, and then some final thoughts. To begin, our first speaker is Dr. Georgianne Bordarella. She is a board-certified physician of internal medicine and a patient advocate. After a successful practice in primary care, she advocated for both her parents through long, difficult terminal illnesses. Traveling with her mother through her end-of-life journey, Georgianne was disheartened to learn how broken the healthcare delivery system had become. She experienced firsthand how difficult it was to access and optimize quality care, manage payment, and ensure that her mother's values, needs, and goals were honored. This discouraging experience compelled Georgianne to focus her expertise and medical knowledge on patient advocacy full-time. In 2016, she founded, as Vicki mentioned, Patient Advocacy MD. With more than 20 years of experience, Georgianne understands the complexities of medical diagnoses, healthcare delivery, and the way the system works from the inside. How healthcare is delivered, accessed, and received and paid for depends upon the convergence of many different people and organizations. Even with the best technology, analytics, and actuarial data at the top levels of the machinery that drives healthcare organizations, the expertise of a physician advocate is essential to identify, understand, advise, and facilitate communication. This is especially true when there is a breakdown between people and the healthcare process. In addition to her work as a physician and patient advocate, Georgianne is a medical advisor and also a member of a coalition to transform advanced care. She has served as chair of foundations and as president of the National Association of Healthcare Advocate Consultants. Rather than describe her very impressive education, I would just like to share something that she sent to our panel when I asked her what being an advocate meant to her. For me, the meaning of advocacy and advocating is to know gratitude. As a physician advocating for my patients, I'd become increasingly frustrated working within a healthcare system that had an incomparable capability to deliver state-of-the-art care, but was so fragmented that accessing and receiving such care was increasingly more difficult and at times even impossible. By the time I had traveled my mother's end-of-life journey with her, I experienced firsthand how broken this system had become. The wonderful clients and families that I've been privileged to serve as a patient advocate have allowed me to turn my experience into a force of positive change, give back, and pay it forward. To share an extraordinary case she has done that with, I warmly welcome Dr. Georgianne Barbarella.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'd like to present a case today that I think illuminates Vicki's theme. It also underscores that patient advocacy is a multidisciplinary field that requires expertise and professional training, particularly in the law, in insurance, and in medicine. A gentleman called me and asked if I would assist him in filing an appeal to the insurance company to reverse a denial of coverage for the treatment, care, and rehabilitation of his wife, who is an inpatient in an extended care facility, an ECF. The family receives their health insurance as part of an employee's benefit package from the gentleman's place of work. It's a fully funded plan rather than a self-funded plan, and Adria can better explain this in detail than I. But for the purposes of discussion of this case, it was the insurer, not the employer, who was going to be responsible for the lion's share of the bill. The patient's a 52-year-old woman who was found by her husband unconscious on the kitchen floor. She was life-flighted to a major level 1 trauma center in Cleveland, and an MRI showed a subdural hematoma. That is a blood clot between the outer and middle lining of the brain that was the result of this acute injury. Emergency life-saving surgery was performed to evacuate that clot and repair any damaged vessels. And the neurosurgeon informed the family that the patient had done well given the gravity of this injury. She remained in a coma for a few days, which is not uncommon. And when she woke up, her reflexes were intact. She could move her limbs. She could squeeze a hand on command. She could nod in the affirmative or the negative when asked to do so. She could even, her eye movements could track. And what that means is when asked to focus on a moving object, she could do that with her eyes. So the family was told by the neurosurgeon and the healthcare team at this trauma center that based upon this type of acute brain injury, coupled with this patient's initial responses and what the physicians and healthcare team were finding in the clinical record and what they knew of the scientific data, that she had a pretty good chance to recover a quality of life. However, it would require intense physical therapy and rehab, and the literature showed that it could take up to 1 year before they could know the extent of this patient's recovery. And you have to keep this in mind because along the way, the insurance company is going to compare this injury to a massive stroke, which is a different diagnosis, has a much difference and usually poorer prognosis and a different treatment. So she is transferred to the first ECF, which is an LTAC. And basically what that is, it offers specialized care. And what this patient needed at the time was to be weaned off the ventilator. Now, here's where the perfect storm begins to churn. You already know that the insurance company's motivation could be not to pay. Now, what you're going to see when you couple that motivation with a fragmented delivery system in which the working parts simply don't talk to each other, they don't collaborate, they don't coordinate care and payment of of care, that gives the insurer the platform to deny payment. The Excellent Trauma Center has now handed off the patient to this ECF. The medical care isn't as optimal, it's more non-communicative, and it's going to become increasingly more defensive and adversarial to this patient and her family. After a long ambulance ride, the patient's admitted to this LTAC, and she's tired and she's sleeping. The attending physician sees her on admission, but only once. He doesn't wake her up. He doesn't perform a neurologic exam. He doesn't speak to the trauma center that just released her from their care to his care. So he documents she's unresponsive, she's not showing purposeful movement. But within a few days, she's off the vent. And this progress is significant. It's a milestone because what it shows is that the part of the brain that controls respiration works and it's intact. So the physical therapy begins, and the case manager and the physical therapist and that team begin to interact with this patient. And increasingly, they find that she has more periods of being awake and alert. She continues to show progress. They continue to document that her limbs are stronger, her reflexes are faster. She's got more of an ability to follow commands. That gets better. She does sleep a lot, but that's not uncommon. And her recovery is really remarkable. But after 1 week of this treatment, the family is told by the insurer that payment for care will cease in 48 hours, and they will be responsible for the bill, which is custodial only, and physical therapy and rehab is going to cease. Now, that runs contrary to everything this family's been told. And I can tell you as a physician, it runs contrary to the scientific literature on this diagnosis and what this team is observing on her clinical progress, the objective facts of her particular case. The family learns the denial is predicated upon that attending physician's note. That's it. So subsequently, the family began their own first round of advocacy. And I got to say, they did very well. They started videotaping the patient. She's batting a ball back and forth to the therapist and her daughter. She's getting better at following commands. She's exhibiting improved muscle strength and so on. She still has the trach tube in, so she can't talk. They send the video to the attending physician, and he agrees to accept a peer-to-peer review. And basically what that is the attending physician speaks to a physician who works for the insurance company, and they discuss the case and whether or not it basically gets re-evaluated for reversal of this denial of payment. Subsequently, after this review, the insurance company approved for 1 week of rehabilitation. Now, I will tell you that's absurd. It's like giving a patient a fraction of the medicine they need, and then you hope they get better when you know they need the full dose of medicine to recover. But the family felt they overcame a hurdle, and with the upcoming week, they knew was paid for. The patient gets transferred to a second ECF because she no longer requires the care of she's not on a ventilator anymore, and she doesn't require that care. And now you will see these events unspool like the inside of a golf ball. She enters the ECF. Physical therapy, again, documents she's continuing to improve. Her trach tube is removed, and the first thing she says to her husband, "I am tired of watching the sports channel on TV. Can you turn a movie on?" She also looks at him and she says, "Honey, you're here all the time. Go home, sleep, and eat." Now, this is excellent progress, obviously, but it shows the higher functioning parts of the brain are intact. Why? She can tell you what she wants. She can express empathy. She can express love. So she begins to sit up with minimal assistance. She can brush her hair and put lipstick on. It's kind of clumsy, but she gets it done. And yes, once again, we have an attending physician who comes in at night and finds the patient asleep. And once again, we have no neurologic exam performed. The exam's perfunctory. The doctor doesn't consult with the team, but puts another note in the chart that's cursory and states she's not very responsive, doesn't have much purposeful movements. And the physician does not even discuss this with the family, who had demanded they be present when this physician evaluates the patient. Well, the family requests a peer-to-peer review, which the attending does not show up for, not only once, but twice. Doesn't show up for the peer-to-peers. So the insurance company hangs their hat on the specifics of the written policy, which states if medical necessity for treatment can't be shown after 2 peer-to-peer reviews, no further peer-to-peer reviews are going to be allowed, and there's no more ability to file an internal appeal to reverse that denial. So the only final appeal they're offered is an external appeal, which I know Adria can comment in far better detail, but basically it's unacceptable for 2 reasons. It takes too long. Remember, I said the rehab has to be immediate, intense, and consistent. And secondly, it could very well be your last shot out of the park. You won't get another chance to appeal. So at this point, they call me. And my assessment of this is this: what do we already know? What help do I need? And who should take the lead in this case? Should it be law? Should it be insurance? Or should it be medicine? So let's go through those 3. Medically, here's what we know. The scientific and medical literature clearly state this acute type of injury is different in the diagnosis, the treatment, and the prognosis of many other brain injuries, including a massive stroke, which the insurance company is trying to argue it's not any different. We also know further from the scientific data that the recommended treatment that she's receiving has been shown to be the standard of care and therefore the best practices in the care of this type of injury if you want to maximize a positive outcome. And finally, I know that upon review of the objective clinical finding, what's in the chart of how she's doing. And I also know from speaking to the staff at the trauma center in the ECF that this lovely lady is improving as well or better than predicted by the literature, by the science, by the data. And so I also know, according to the literature, we may not even know what this patient's personal best recovery is for up to 12 months. So do you need an insurance expert at this point? Well, I did call Adria and ask her to stand by. However, in this case, I had the full and excellent cooperation of the employer and the insurance broker. And Adria can tell you, with employers less cooperative than this, an employee's job could be at risk if you start advocating this, because the employer may consider the employee's grievance to just be in the way of their successful running and administrating their health care benefits. So when you look at a case, you got to be really careful of that. And finally, did this family need a lawyer? Well, ultimately, yes, they did. But I often call the lawyer sooner rather than later. And I did that in this instance. Not because I want to initially advocate by coming out with guns a-blazing or ginning up my clients and their family to sue somebody. That's not my expertise. That should always be decided on with an attorney and a client. But in my experience, if I personally start advocating by going nuclear, especially in the case of dealing with this insurance company, you can bet they're going to go nuclear. So I mainly call a lawyer early on because experience has taught me that having a lawyer on the team through the advocacy process in many, many cases brings an expertise that can enhance rapport building. It can often speed up the process, cut to the chase, get the ball in the end zone, and get you to your intended goals and achieve goals faster. The argument for medical necessity was so glaringly obvious that that's where I started. And as I said, it's customary for me to begin my advocacy positively and non-confrontationally. And the first thing I start when I start a case is, who are my allies? Who are my allies within the organizations I'm going to be required to engage with to advocate for my client? Well, in the case of this insurance company, I didn't have a whole lot of allies, but I did have people in the trauma center and at the second ECF facility, extended care facility. And what I'm looking for is somebody who's not only really, really good at their job, but they're committed to what is in the patient's best interest. And the other thing I'm looking for is, can they think outside the box and beyond a script that their organization's risk management might hand them? So I usually take my argument straight up in an insurance company to the medical director. But in this case, he refused to speak to me. But he did refer me to the physician who is conducting the peer-to-peer reviews. And when we presented the facts of the case, the medical literature, best practices, she had to concede the medical necessity of treatment. And she could simply not defend a denial based upon anything other than what I had presented. As a physician speaking to another physician, she had to also discount the errant physician's cursory notes, and that they were running contrary to best practices. And finally, based on our mutual experience in training as physicians, I emphasized to her that we take an oath to do no harm. Therefore, we cannot count the failure of a physician to follow through with a peer-to-peer review as a valid failure of a peer-to-peer review to show that treatment is medically necessary. And if she did that, that not only flies in the face of best practices, it flies in the face of common sense. They tried to spin the facts. They tried intimidating me, and the family, and the providers. But the facts prevailed, and we got 100 days of coverage. Sadly, this case got more complicated because of COVID and subsequent hospital admissions for infections, and it is now in the hands of the attorney as the lead advocate. And in conclusion, I just want to add a few things. That good medicine is not only good patient care, which leads to good health, it's good policy, and it's good business. As an advocate, what I'm amazed I see too often are the people and the organizations, whether they're the insurers, the administrators, the healthcare facilities, or the providers, how many of them seem to too often minimize, ignore, or simply disregard the risk and risk exposure they face by denying access to care, the care itself, or payment of that care. And I'll leave you with 3 quick examples. Think about Boeing. Think about what happened and what it cost Boeing when they brushed under the carpet the known risks of putting that MAX Dreamliner in the air. Think about the pandemic world we now live in. The lack of early testing and contact tracing brought global economies to a grinding halt, and we're going to be digging out of that one for a long time. And finally, think about my client. Think about my client and her wonderful family. Acknowledging her treatment as medically necessary and paying for it is not only the right thing to do, it's the less expensive thing to do, and it's the most risk-averse. Facilitating a healthy quality of life is, in the long run, much cheaper than the cost, morally and financially, of sentencing someone to a bed for the rest of their lives and the cost of the multiple complications that are going to come with that. So advocating and paying for good health care is really good for each and every one of us. Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgiana, for the incredible work that you're doing and the support that you gave that family, and hopefully the message that you gave to the larger community about how important it is that we take that person seriously and as a priority. Really appreciate that. I know there were a couple of questions that showed up in the chat. Vicki, did you see them?
So here, I don't have a specific question, but I just took down a couple of notes, and we did get some feedback about, first of all, some nice feedback about what great information this is, and obviously that is, and in fact something just came through again. What I wrote down is, and Georgianne said this, and I'll reinforce it. By background, I'm a nurse and do advocacy. Is that when you look at these cases, the complexity of a case and the benefit of engaging professionals who really are equipped, educated, and able to, be able to work within the system and know the inner sanctum of what goes on in the healthcare delivery system, or insurance, in the legal field, etc. And for instance, if somebody has to research diagnoses, who do you want research your diagnoses? Do you want an MD to research your diagnoses? Hey, I can tell you that if that was me, that's what I would want, right? And to interface with professionals, because they're going to talk the same line. And even if you have some, maybe some, I'll call it friction, or not in the beginning, cooperation, I mean, you can cut through those layers because you really know with the buttons to push. There's so many moving parts to this, everybody. So many moving parts when you get into these situations and working with everybody. And the ultimate goal is that the person gets the right care. They get the care that they deserve, and that they are entitled to, and that they absolutely positively need. So that's kind of what my take is. And I'm not sure if anybody, I don't have anything, let me just double check. I don't have anything in the Q&A at this point.
There is there was a question, what does one do if they lack the financial means to obtain this type of advocacy?
Okay, I didn't see that, thank you.
So I have an answer for that. Georgianne, there's a patient advocacy group. They're located in Virginia. I could send you the information later. But what I've seen, those type of cases going there, I don't know if they would go to the extent of what Georgianne went through with this case, but they definitely help people who can't pay their medical bills.
Yes.
And if someone can't afford me, I send them directly to them.
Yeah, and that's a great suggestion. Thanks, Adria.
And I would add that wherever this questioner lives, within your local area, look at the community services, interview, because, for example, I'm Cleveland-based. My services I offer around the country, but I'm Cleveland and New York-based. And in Cleveland here, we do have some community organization and nonprofits that can assist in advocacy. And many of us do a little pro bono work. So I do a certain amount. And if you can get an advocate that is, you're on the list for some pro bono work, it can be paid for that way.
Thank you,
I just want to make that I agree totally with what Vicki said. And Georgianne, I think that education needs to be done at the provider level. You made a statement that's so true. Good medicine is good business. I know that good lawyering is good business, and it just happens to be. So they, just like you mentioned, Boeing, what a great example. If they actually resolved the issue head on, and just dealt with it.
For sure.
The fallout wouldn't have been like this. And So I think there needs to be education at the provider level, the institutional level, and I think that's very important. From a consumer point of view, I know that many hospitals, they want good exit reviews, and as hard as they try to discharge their patients, they definitely don't want a readmission within 30 days, and they have to, they don't want certain things to happen, and they certainly want good exit reviews, exit surveys. So just from a consumer point of view, you have a little bit of power in that, because the facilities, will listen to that. So,
and you're right. Yeah, those are great points.
Yeah, and the underscore, sorry to interrupt, but the underscore on that, and thank you, Ron, because those are very critical and important issues, is that when we're talking about these things, that has to tie into reimbursement issues and such. So, there's element. There is, I think we'll take this one last point and then move on. We have a attendee asking, what does one do if they do not have family to help with care or advocacy and are low income? Well, I think we looked at the low income perspective, is that there are other options which you certainly can contact anybody on this call, and we will be giving out contact information. And of course, not having a family, that is a big issue, and that happens it's very, very prevalent. And so let's take away the low income part of it, and you don't have family. What happens is that if you appoint an advocate, engage an advocate, that advocate is then, it's their sacred responsibility to negotiate, to be involved, to be to get you the best quality care that they can, that's available. Unfortunately, like I said, there's a lot of people out there without family members. And by the way, there's a lot of people that have family that don't want to be involved. That's the other issue too.
Yeah, good point, Vicki. There are so many points to really get back to if we can, but the insurance concerns that Georgianne, actually, this client was left with, are actually the perfect segue to our next speaker. Adria Gross is actually the founder of MedWise Insurance Advocacy. She is a New York State licensed insurance broker and a consultant, and she finds the loopholes through which insurance companies attempt to deny claims and helps individuals resolve medical claim matters. She's the co-author of Solved: Curing Your Medical Insurance Problems and Multi-Payer Medicine Nightmare Made in the USA. Terrific title, Adria. Besides wanting her to be at everyone's side as they age, she has already helped hundreds of people, those who are vulnerable themselves, their families, and the support networks who might be struggling, and professionals who reach out to her on an almost daily basis for her assistance and her wisdom. And as she shares her case, you will see why.
Thank you so much, Carol. And thank you, Georgianne. I mean, Georgianne and I have known each other for a while. She's fantastic. And Ron and Jackie, thank you for everything. So I'm going to talk to you about a case that's going on right now. I've been working on it for a few months. And it involves two people who are both 75 years old. Mrs. Wilma Smith was retired, and her husband, Fred Smith, had insurance with his employer. And, even, when Georgianne was talking about this self-funded, self-insured ERISA plans, this is exactly what happened in the case. It's the same thing. But, but Georgianne was also, before I get on to the case, I want to tell you this. Georgianne was talking about, and she and I had conversations about this, when you are working, in this case, I'm about to tell you about, the person he was 75 years old. He was still working, and then they decided to let him go at 75. He had worked for the company for a total of about 20 years. And, they brought him back at one point. He was there for 8 years, and now it's getting to the end. But the thing is that, and before I get on this case, I just have to mention this, is, when you're working for a self-funded, self-insured ERISA plan, company that offers the ERISA plan. The question is, what could happen to you? Are you in good terms with the company? How long have you been working there? Because if you have a case that you're going to start discussing with them, and you've only been there for a short period of time, and you're not on the best terms with them, a lot of these companies will fire you. And that's one of the first questions I ask people when a situation like this comes up. And any questions you have about this, we will talk about. I'll give you the best advice I can. But going back to this case, Wilma and Fred Smith, Fred had insurance with his employer. So after 20 to 25 years of employment, Fred lost his job at 75, and he was placed on a COBRA for 18 months. He and his wife were paying approximately $2,600 a month for his COBRA medical coverage. So, even here, he's over 65, and I will get further into this. The thing is, the HR department for this was really at fault, because even when he lost his job, they kept on making promises to him. Don't worry, you're going to be covered. You're going to pay us $2,600. So here he's working for this Fortune 50 employer. We're going to call it Unscrupulous Inc., who was supposed to cover him on their insurance company, not up to snuff insurance company. And he had coverage from December 2017 until June 2019. His Medicare Part B, again, he was supposed to have it from December 2017 until June 2019. And his Medicare Part B was supposed to begin June 2019. So here, when the time came, starting in December 2017, he had this not up to snuff insurance company who was covering him, and then his Medicare Part A was secondary. Okay, so Fred was employed by Unscrupulous Inc. from December 31st of 2017, and his COBRA began really January 1st of 2018, ending in 2019. The COBRA plans are usually 18 or 36 months, depending upon the case, and they vary, and there are laws that you can read about it to see what the difference is for the 18 and 36 months. So Fred had a history of medical issues, and 2 weeks after his layoff, he was hospitalized for numerous surgeries. He became disabled, and he went to a nursing facility care and later was receiving nursing and care. So here he was going, it was amazing. Here he's going in and out of the hospital with nursing care in between. So Fred's employer, Unscrupulous Inc., used an unfair policy for medical coverage during and after his layoff, which was also offered at the age of 65. And they kept on saying, there's going to be less coverage, now that you're over 65. But that's not really what happened. So here, his layoff when the employees over the age of 65 were provided less medical coverage than the employees until 65. Even though he was told that, it never happened. He had the same coverage as someone who was working for the company who was 40 years old. He had his COBRA policy from December 2017 and was supposed to be covered through June 30th, 2019. He receives a layoff memo from his employer where it stated that the policy applied only to employees under the age of 65 without any warning to employees over the age of 65. So, look, if they wanted him to do a switchover where Medicare was going to be his primary and they were going to be his secondary, they never told him that. So here he's paying that $2,600 and he's supposed to get the same care as someone who's under 65. Unscrupulous Inc., that's his employer, their human resources customer service department was totally inexperienced dealing with layoffs with people who are 65 years or older. So multiple employees at Unscrupulous Inc.'s human resources customer service department continued to tell Fred and Wilma not to worry and that they were going to be covered. by the Up to Snuff Insurance Company as their primary insurer from December 1st of 2017 until June 30th of 2019. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself too many times. But this unscrupulous thing did not forewarn or even actually portray the reduced coverage, and certainly did not reduce his premium to $2,600 per month. Unscrupulous, as I said before, they've had prior experience with these problems. They were refusing to correct the mistake with Fred and Wilma, as well as many of their other laid-off employees. So this company kept on doing it, not just to Wilma and Fred, but they were doing this to many other people. And the thing is that the people who ran the customer service department didn't realize, hey, you know what? These people are 65 or older, so we should handle this differently. And they did. So after the layoff, Unscrupulous Inc. provides a letter to Wilma and Fred certifying that Unscrupulous Inc. was covering the cost of all his Medicare coverage through the Not Up to Snuff Insurance Company. And the letter did not actually portray Up to Snuff Insurance Company with a reduced COBRA coverage. The policy, as I said before, that they were receiving was exactly the same as when Fred was a full-time employee in Unscrupulous Inc. So again, here we go from February 1st of 2019. This is one major hospital in their state. It's a university hospital. So from February 1st of 2019 until June 30th of 2019, Unscrupulous's customer service department and the coordination of benefits totally misled Fred and Wilma. They come to me. They have bills over $100,000. I said, Adria, please help us with this. So, Not Up to Snuff company's customer service department. This is, if I'm telling you this is crazy, they kept on reversing the payments and reprocessing the claims up to 5 times. Here we have $100,000. We're going to pay it. No, we're not. They took the money back. It was going back and forth 5 times. And finally, the family came to me. So this was going on for 8 months prior to bringing me on, where, again, Not Up to Snuff insurance companies continued to misinform Fred and Wilma. And literally, this was over 75 phone calls. So again, they've been billed over $100,000 in medical expenses. Instead of, and this is like amazing, the Up to Snuff insurance company's out-of-pocket maximum was $7,000. So, okay, they're responsible for, the family's responsible for $7,000. And Up to Snuff keeps on, saying, oh, we're going to pay it. We're not going to pay it, back and forth. Well, something that Georgianne was talking about before is, who do you turn to, Mm-hmm. So, again, this Not Up to Snuff insurance company and Unscrupulous Inc. They're self-insured, self-funded, and ERISA plan, which provide coverage, which is promised to them. It was promised to them when they called the company up. It was promised to them when Fred went into COBRA. So here he's paying that $2,600. All this stuff is promised to them. Well, I spoke to the Not Up to Snuff insurance company and explained the entire situation to them. And Not Up to Snuff agreed. They said, Adria, we are going to pay these bills. And then, and believe it or not, the paperwork that was sent to me, we're talking over 2,000 pages of work, of bills, of explanations of benefits, of all the correspondence that went on. And here, Not Up to Snuff insurance company says, Adria, we're going to pay it. I'm all excited. I'm like, this is great. But then, all of a sudden, the executive office of Not Up to Snuff insurance company contacts me and says, we're not going to pay these medical bills because Unscrupulous Inc. has directed us that Fred should have been on Medicare. And here they're saying, oh, you don't need Medicare. We're going to insure you. Medicare is going to be your secondary. So I thought to myself, okay, what am I going to do next? I called Medicare, and they confirmed to me that Fred's Medicare coverage would not begin until his COBRA ended. So the COBRA is supposed to end in June, the end of June. And Medicare was nice enough to say, okay, we're going to cover him for the month of June and going beyond that, from June 2018 and on. So now I get a phone call back from his employer, and they're saying to me, Adria, he should have had Medicare. We're taking the money back. I became so angry that I called the CEO of this employer in scrupulously. And believe it or not, I remember it was July 17th at 5 p.m. in the afternoon, just recently. I called him up and I told him who I am and what is happening and what my plans were going to do if they didn't do the right thing. And again, it's a Friday night, July 17th. It's 7 p.m. I get a phone call from his legal department. And the legal department is now arguing with me. And they're still at a point saying to me now that they're working on it. But believe it or not, I am so excited because they have paid the hospital all his bills for that June, which my fear is Medicare might come back and say, Medicare did pay it. That was paid by Medicare. And also, it seems to me that the insurance company is also paying it. So one of them might come back and say, hey, we want our money for the month of May. But now what he still has outstanding is the bills from February until April. So now what I just saw this past week is they started paying the bills for April also. So they haven't paid February. They haven't paid March. But bottom line is, his Medicare is not going to begin until that June. So what is he going to do? Pay out of pocket for all of this? Am I going to have to negotiate the fees down to help them? But we're still working on the case. I hope and pray that they do pay for those other months. I mean, these bills in total are over $100,000, and at least they're starting to pay back. And hopefully they're not going to turn around and say, hey, we want the money back that we paid out. So, what Georgianne was talking about before is the question is this. If you work for a self-funded, self-insured company that offers an ERISA plan, when these kind of things happen, where are you going to go? Mm-hmm. And I know that Georgianne spoke about attorneys, and there are some attorneys who do this work, but you have a lot of attorneys out there who don't know anything about this work.
Yeah.
And with my book, I lecture to individuals, I lecture to attorneys, CPAs, financial planners. They don't know where to go. But you do have some attorneys out there who do know where to move on this. But even what I want to go back to is when it is a self-funded, self-insured risk plan. And I learned this a long time ago. If it's an emergency and you weren't covered for it, they can only charge you the reasonable customary charges. If it was an emergency. But if you're planning for a procedure and you are informed in advance, it's going to be, I have a case that came, it was $176,000. And it was an ERISA plan. They spoke to the employer. They said, don't worry. It turned out to be they didn't pay it. They were after her for $176,000. The insurance company did pay out about 30 or maybe 60 grand of that. It was brain surgery. And they were still after her for the difference. So they were after her for over $100,000. And luckily, her employer stepped in and said, don't worry, we'll take care of you. But she worked for this company for quite a while. She was very well liked. But let's say you're working for a company where you don't really are not on the best terms with them, or you haven't been working there that long. You're going to be stuck with this crazy amount of money. And the doctors who do the surgery on you have to tell you in advance what it's going to cost. They have to give it to you and hand it to you. If they don't, you're not responsible to pay that bill because they didn't forewarn you. And this has been a big thing that has come up in many states, and they have laws on this. So I just want to also explain this to people. When you are having issues like this, and if it is a self-funded, self-insured ERISA plan, you can go to the state, and you can go to the Department of Insurance, you can go to the Attorney General, you can discuss it with them. But a lot of states will totally not get involved because this is really the labor. You have to go to the Labor Department and appeal with them. So people think to themselves, hey, look, you know what? Am I going to lose my job if I go ahead to Department of Labor, or if I go to the Attorney General, or, if I go to Department of Insurance? Are they going to fire me? And that's what happens a lot. That's the reason why I even tell people, I say to them, okay, when you had this bill, one of the first questions I ask people when they come to me with a bill, is it a large company? How many employees do they have? Was it self-funded, self-insured ERISA plan? Because it's so hard to fight the employer. It's so difficult. And in my book that I wrote, and I was shocked that Ralph made it like so much in my international edition, it's a guide to direct people where to go. And the best advice I can give you is when you're looking to see, let's say you can't get something paid, go on to Medicare. They have a fee schedule that you can look at that will tell you how much they can normally be paid, at least by Medicare. Now, I've got to be honest with you. My husband was working for a bank. He was on an ERISA plan. I went to the doctor. Believe it or not, the money that was paid out according to this plan was the money that they would get from Medicaid. They got less money even what Medicare would pay. You can always go online and negotiate with your doctors about what the Medicare rates are. And sometimes it's even Medicaid. And I just settled a case this week where they're charging her 300%. She went in the hospital. It was $11,000. They lowered it down to $5,100, $5,100. Her doctor sent her to the hospital for a CAT scan. That CAT scans normally, according to Medicare, are $400. So they went from $11,000 to $5,500 down to $1,200, and she agreed to pay the $1,200. But when you think about it, that's 3 times the rates of Medicare rates. So,
Unbelievable.
The best advice I can give is always, look at the Medicare rates because that's really what the normal payment is. And the one thing I always tell people is fight for your rights. Don't give up. Because people get to a point where they say, what am I going to do? How can I go about this? And that's what I also tell them is, fight for your rights. I have taken on some cases where I tell people at no charge. I always tell them, call me on the weekends. I'm giving you the steps to take. Tell me how far you get. I'll tell you the next steps to take. And I've done that. And I've helped a lot of people. So anyhow, thank you for having me here, Carol.
Thank you, Adria. You're a blessing beyond words. I know a couple of questions actually did come in, but I don't see them. So again, Vicki, can you assist me here? Thank you.
Second, I will get there. Sorry, let me go back. Did they come? Okay. Sorry, guys, I'm looking for them.
You want me to read it to you?
No, I got it. Okay. So here's the question is about the cost of the family of a mistaken break in my mother's Medicaid while she was being administered by, I think this is NYCHR, NYCHRA. It must be Human Rights Administration.
Human Resources Administration.
Human Resources, okay. And thank you, Ron. It ended up costing us over $2,000 for an aid due to, I believe, some paperwork error. And HRA NYC says that they are unable to help. My mother has 24/7 split shift aid that came from Medicaid, CDPAP, Community Medicaid. How can we have assistance with recouping the $2,046 that we paid the aides with proof, so mom's care would continue during the 5 days of all, with that 5 days of all saying that they weren't authorized to pay CDPAP aides?
I mean, if they paid it out already, it's hard to get the money back.
Say again?
If I always tell people, if you pay it, it's very difficult to get the money back. Like even with this case that I told you about with Wilma and Fred Smith, I mean, they might be paid double now. This hospital might be paid double, and then even to try and get the money back. I mean, it's so hard when you have paid something. It's very difficult to ever get the money back.
Right. I agree, and that's true. But if Medicaid really should have covered, and they made a mistake and did not cover, we could ask for reimbursement. Just like when we put in a Medicaid application for home care, we could go back 3 months and get those 3 months reimbursed if the individual was eligible for Medicaid up to 3 months and used the licensed Medicare Medicaid agency. So we can ask for a reimbursement.
And if I can weigh in on this, and I don't want to for some reasons I want to think about this, but if I'll look to see who this was, and my information will be posted how to contact me. There are other options, let me put it that way, that can potentially help in a situation like this, which I've utilized. And I don't, insurance advocacy is not my thing. I'll give it to Adria, but there have been times when I've gotten involved, and so I have a little bit of, ideas of how to handle this, and it could be handled very effectively.
Just want to ask you one question, Adria, about a statement you made while you were going through the case. You said you were so angry about this and then, proceeded to act. I'm wondering if you could just speak for a moment to that feeling as an advocate and how you channel that and make something good come of it, because it's a very common feeling. We often get frustrated when we're up against these walls, and I just would appreciate hearing your thoughts on that since you have so much experience.
Well, yeah, I feel that, look, what if that was me? I always look at my clients as if they were my family. And how would I feel? And what am I going to do about it? And I think of every avenue possible to try and resolve it. I have to be honest with you. I mean, look, you can go to the Attorney General, you can go to the Department of Insurance, you can go to the media. I mean, I've been published 4 times in Consumer Reports. I've been published in many, many, many different articles. But you can also go to your politicians. I have a case right now where the woman who was married to her husband for 6 months, he worked for the federal government. The fact that she wasn't married to him for 9 months rather than 6 months, they're saying, we're not going to cover you on your husband's policy. I'm like, this is insane. And what I did with this case, that one I took right to her senators. And they're working on it to help her because he worked for the federal government. He passed away. That's the reason why she was only married to him for 6 months. Mm-hmm. And the craziest thing, this is crazy. They keep on sending her insurance cards every year. He died almost 3 years ago. And then they're taking all the money back. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah. I think there has to be a kind of coming to terms with just how far this all goes. But on the flip side of that, I do want to say that the work that you and Georgiana are talking about doing, it really has quite a ripple effect. There's opportunities not just for that person or that family to get support, but there's opportunities in a way to go to what Ron had talked about, which is educating organizations better and giving people a chance to maybe examine their protocols. So what you're doing really extends. It's wonderful that you're helping an individual, but it really does have the opportunity to extend tremendously. And Thank you, Adrian. And speaking of ripple effects, our last speaker, his advocacy efforts can probably fill an ocean. He is the most gracious host of our webinar, and I just want to personally thank you, Rump, for honoring advocacy in such an important way and for bringing it to the forefront of our attention. You're really quite a special man in this field, and we're very grateful to you. And Vicki, thank you for helping to make that happen and facilitate it all. I wanted to share a little bit about Ron's background because it's pretty extraordinary. He's the principal of the New York-based law firm, Ronald Fatula Associates, where he practices in the areas of elder law, estate planning, Medicaid planning, trusts, wills, guardianship, and estate administration. He serves on the executive committee of the Elder Law and Special Needs section of the New York State Bar Association, serves as co-chair of the board of directors of the Long Island chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and has also served on the executive council of AARP in New York. He has the honor of being recognized by Best Lawyers in America since 2007 for elder law and trusts and estate, and has been recognized by Super Lawyers for 14 years for the New York Metro in elder law. His distinguished reputation is based on his contributions to the senior community, thank you, and to the special needs community. Mr. Fatula has been quoted numerous times in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and Newsday. He is a fellow of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys and a former member of its board of directors. He is also a partner advisor of Advice Period, a comprehensive wealth management firm. Advice Period's mission is to provide the best independent financial advice available, whether individuals are investing for retirement or for college education. The firm's aim is to have its clients reach their goals through proper management of their assets, and most importantly, with timely, thoughtful, and creative estate planning, tax, and financial advice. And while he does strive to assist individuals, he is always considering the bigger picture. And he's been a part of a significant and very exciting legislative success story that he's going to be sharing with you now. Ron?
Thanks so much, Carol. I really do appreciate that introduction. Boy, thank you. And thank you, Adria. That was really terrific. And Georgianne. And of course, Jackie, for everything that you do, and Vicki, for everything that you guys do. I really appreciate it. So what Carol was alluding to, I want to go back now to the early 2000s. And in the early 2000s, I saw a huge injustice. We had situations, well, they're called granny snatching scenarios. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but we had several of these cases where typically it's a family member, but anyone, it could have been a healthcare worker or someone else, but typically it was a family member that actually took grandma or parent out of one state into another state. And you have to understand that the full faith and credit, there isn't any between states when it comes to guardianship action. So what does that mean? It means that if someone is appointed as a guardian in New York, and then they go to New Jersey, well, New York could say anything in their courts. New Jersey doesn't recognize it. There's no full faith and credit. So if grandma, ma is taken out of New York, well, if there's already a guardianship in place in New York, you got to start all over again in another state. And if there wasn't anything in New York and grandma was taken out of New York unwillingly, many times with dementia that happens, out of this state into another state, and a guardianship action would have to be brought in that other state just to bring the individual back to New York and have another full-blown guardianship action back in New York. And many times these are contested and would take months. And so I saw an injustice. And as Carol said, I needed to look at the bigger picture. And yes, we advocated for our clients, but I wanted to do something more. So it was at a point in time when I had a few of these cases come into my office, and I thought that was unusual, but fine. You know, we're going to do whatever we can. We worked with attorneys from other states, and but then, believe it or not, something like that happened in my own family. And so I said to myself, I am going on a mission to do whatever I can to make sure that this doesn't happen to everyone else just the way it has been. It's almost akin to anyone watch the cowboy movies in the past when the sheriff is chasing the bad guy and the bad guy is racing for the border and the sheriff can't quite catch up to the bad guy who just crossed the border and has to just stop. Well, it's the same thing with the guardianship. If grandma is snatched from one state to the next state, the first state where she might have lived her entire life can do nothing. So that was an injustice. And I, yes, advocated for our clients on a one-to-one basis, but I needed to do more. And in my mind, this situation, this craziness had to stop. And at the time, there was a fix, which was the Uniform Adult Guardianship Act. Some states have recognized it, signed on to it. New York didn't. And there was no action, no traction in New York whatsoever for this. But I made it my mission to bring this to New York, and it took almost 10 years. Spoke to legislators, the bar associates. Legislators said they would think about it if the bar association would vet it all out. Went to the bar association, and in my mind, it was such a black and white matter. But then you get attorneys representing the facilities that said, no, every state is different. We don't want reciprocity. It was just crazy, and all of the politics and et cetera. But I persevered. I didn't want this to continue. And ultimately, in, I believe it was 2013, but was effective in 2014, New York State finally, Governor Cuomo signed on to the Uniform Adult Guardianship Act. It's law in New York. We have a new Article 83 of the mental hygiene law as a result of the efforts that I did. And then I brought on, believe me, I wasn't an island in this. Maybe I spearheaded it initially, but I got a team together, and it was wonderful. New York State signed on, and this is what New York State has now. Along now, after that, with most other states, I think now only 3 other states have not signed on to this. Unfortunately, one of those states is Florida, where a lot of seniors go, but we do need a fix to that. So here's what happens. Let's say grandma is snatched away from New York to, let's pick another state, like I think Pennsylvania is in it, or New Jersey. Let's say to New Jersey. So grandma is snatched to New Jersey, and it happens. It happens often. I know it might sound comical. It's not funny at all, and it's awful. And in a couple of the cases, Adult Protective Services were called. There were abuses in the other state, and we couldn't get New York State, where she lived her whole life, to intervene. It was awful. Now, with all the states that have signed on, and I think almost all signed on except for a couple, if grandma is snatched into another state and New York State has appointed a guardian, it's a very quick deal where the 2 guardianship courts will talk to each other and will quickly resolve the issue and get mom or grandma back to New York, and that's it. You know, just things are now so different with this, and it worked. But there are so many nuances to the case. In New York, we have Article 83, which is our guardianship law, but there is just so many nuances, and everyone had a, lawyers like to talk, everyone had a comment. But we finally got it done. I was very proud of this. And as a surprise to me, it was great. It was a feather in the hat of the New York State Bar as well, because they really then, because we brought them in, well, because when I went to legislators, they said they really want the okay from the New York State Bar, which took a couple of years to get. And this was a feather in the hat of the New York State Bar. And at our annual meeting years ago, I think it was in 2014, I went into this big meeting. There's about 500 lawyers at this meeting, and I was surprised. They had a big surprise for me and an award given to me because of my efforts in bringing this to this law to New York State, as backed by the New York State Bar. But that's how it happens. So I just want to say, whether you're a physician and you see an injustice, you're in insurance and you see an injustice, whether you're a patient advocate and you see an injustice, there are so many levels that you could advocate on. One level is, on that particular case. Another level, which we did, another level is taking that 30,000 view, 30,000 feet up, looking down. And I said to myself, no one should go through this ever again. I felt that so strongly. And I think because of my efforts, and then we got a slew of people, I got a slew of people involved from the New York State Bar and legislators. Most people will never have to go through this again unless grandma or mom is snatched to Florida. Unfortunately, Florida didn't sign on to this, and just another state or two. So I feel very happy. I hope that my efforts change the lives, of many people. And in the last 2 minutes that I have, I just want to say one more thing, on advocacy. So I urge you to obviously do this on a per case basis, but if you can, do something on a more global scale, where you could actually just really make a change for a lot of people. Just think about it. It took me so much time, and someone in my firm said, if you build out all of your time that you spent on doing this, you would be a multi-millionaire, but I feel like I am, because when you change the lives of people for the better, and especially on a more global scale, the feeling you get is just unbelievable. It's just like winning a big case on a more global scale. The other thing I do want to mention is the Medicaid rules are changing for home care. As of January 1, for applications in as of January 1, there's going to be a look back for 30 months that we never had, and transfers starting October 1 are going to be penalized for applications in as of January 1. We just got guidance from the Department of Health. But I do want to mention, come January 1, and actually come anytime right now, because people need to plan now, because October 1 is coming soon, and transfers starting October 1 will be penalized for applications in as of January 1. And there's a tremendous amount of advocacy that we're going to need to do for Medicaid applications that are going to go in for home care. The law is changing, not for the better. It's going to be so much more difficult to get hours. It was already, and the team in my office was prepared for the last change, and we're gearing up for the change, that's coming now. But that's one-on-one advocacy. We really tried so hard. Again, I tried to do it, not just myself, but the New York State Bar's elder law section tried so hard to change this, to make sure, at least we tried to advocate that these changes would not occur, but they did occur. The governor had a Medicaid redesign team, number 2, and some of these suggestions really did not help the consumer. And so here we are. And so advocacy on a one-to-one basis really will need to be done for Medicaid home care to make sure that everyone who needs the care at home will get the care and get the hours that they need. In fact, the new law provides that if an individual is getting high hours, a lot of hours, probably we think even just a 24 hours sleep in, not 2 12-hour shifts, then there's going to be another additional review where Medicaid will, they say, make sure that the individual is safe. But I say they want to see, can they get somebody else off their payroll? So anyway, advocacy can be done on many different levels. I would tell you guys, take a look at it. Always the one-on-one is the key. You roll up your sleeves. It's grassroots. It's wonderful. But on some things, see if you could actually just make a more global change, and maybe you could change the world for so many people and help more than just one at a time. So that's all I have to say. And,
wow, that's an awful lot, Ron. Thank you so much. And, we're going to all hold those goals close to our hearts and hopefully at least work toward achieving them as best we can. I want to just, I can't believe where the hour and a half has gone. I have 5 pages of notes and questions and ideas that we should be further discussing, but I guess that is for another time, Vicki. So what I'd like to do is just take a moment and just thank you, Ron, for doing this for us. Adria, for your incredible work. Georgianne, it's just exquisite to hear how motivated and how serious and passionate you are about your work. I wish you all the best. And to those who are able to stay on for just a few more brief moments, I think, Jackie, we have about 5 minutes left. If I could hand this over to Vicki to help support any discussion, I'd love to do that. Thanks for all your hard work.
Yeah. So thank you, Carol, and thank you to everybody on the panel, Adria, Georgianne, Carol for moderating, and Ron, of course, for that incredible story, and always the utmost respect and admiration for what you've done, and Jackie, of course, for all that you do with our webinars to make them successful and seamless. Thank you for that. What I'm going to grasp from this is that this is not an event. This is a initiative. This is a movement. And when we talk about either one-on-one advocacy or global advocacy, so where Carol has just said, oh, she has a whole lot of questions or input, that that's what we want to see. I mean, if we got to this point and everybody said, hey, we either know everything we want to know, or there's nothing else to learn or nothing to contribute, we'd be like saying, huh? So, what we will plan to do is that we will convene this panel again as we move into, later on in the fall, because we'll look over, the different things that we've grasped from this, and, and it's a ripple effect also in terms of the information. And advocacy is ongoing, and I know from the perspective of advocacy issues what it's like to, even if you don't change the world, if you just move that pendulum just a little, that helps people and makes their lives better, or you accomplish a goal, it is a really amazing feeling, that you were able to do that for another family, for another human being. It really is, I can't think of anything better, as an advocate related to that. I think that we might have, let me just see what we have in terms of, and by the way, thank you to everybody for your lovely and wonderful comments, about how you've enjoyed enjoyed this tremendous. Thank you for all the information. Excellent talk. That makes us say, hey, you know what? We are on the right track with this, with amazing information. So we really appreciate that. The other thing I'll say is that we are always in the mode to look to connect with people, and if we have people on the call on the webinar that want to talk to us about things that we can do together, we love to do that, and we love to collaborate, be in conversation with us. Jackie can put our information up, and I'll put my information into the chat. And there was something related to, and I'm not sure if Jackie, if you answered this or not, and it goes back to Ron when you were talking about the advocacy issue, and the fact that New York did it, and most states have it, but not Florida or whatever. Asking about power of attorney and documents that are put into place. I'm assuming they're asking maybe if these things are the portability of these documents.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. Powers. Well, you probably, if you can, get the power of attorney signed in every individual state. It's a little different. But for Florida, for example, our powers are fine, but we need witnesses to it. And by the way, the power of attorney law in New York likely will change. There's a new law that passed the New York State Assembly and Senate to totally revamp our power of attorney, waiting for the governor's signature already. So things are going to change in New York. But as of right now, in many states, our power is fine. But in Florida, they do want extra witnesses. So if a client says they might be going to Florida, we might modify it a little bit. But if a client comes into our office and says, well, my daughter lives in, let's say, Arizona or wherever, and we may wind up there, all we do is do the New York power. We actually then speak with co-counsel in whatever state that is, and may modify the power of attorney a little bit to make sure that it'll work in both states.
I'm sorry. You know what? I lost the connection for a second.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Ron, I just want to tell you, thank you for stating that, because I've always wondered, if someone moves to another state, where do they get in touch with it, and how to transfer information over. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is a valid power. Healthcare proxy is called the power of attorney for healthcare decision making in other states outside of New York. But it should typically work in most states, because basically all it is a direction. It's a principal agency relationship where, let's say, mom or dad would assign over the right to someone else, an agent on a power of attorney, or a healthcare agent to make their healthcare decisions. So it's an appointing document to have someone else step in your shoes if you can't make decisions or can't handle your finances.
So that's great. So first of all, thank you to everybody again, panelists, and to our attendees, keeping with the theme of the moment. All right, and remembering Dorothy. You know what? When you have to follow that Yellow Brick Road and you're looking for answers, and my dogs are chiming in. Stop.
That's Toto.
That's a good one.
Toto.
That's right. Right on target. Click those heels 3 times. All right, and hopefully we can get you home, and we can get you to where you need to be with courage, with heart, and with brains. Enjoy the summer.